Natela's photo, and on the right, Tamara Bagelia. And maybe it's the same photographer because it's pretty similar as far as the portraits go. So unfortunately, there is not too much information about Natela Iankoshvili outside of Georgian. Just to start, I wanted to start with these amazing landscapes by her. One is Atom in Gambori and another is Mesfeti, that also kind of highlight Natela's very striking and unique approach to landscape painting. And later on, I have examples of the Soviet contemporaries of her time who took a very different, more traditional approach to painting landscapes of Georgia. Natela is very unique in this way as well. So, and this is, maybe you should read it, Alexandra, since it's quote from you. It makes more sense.
Okay, I'll have to move this box. Okay, so I will read this. So this is my text about Iankoshvili. This is a review that I wrote, I think, last year. Mm-hmm. And I wrote, the directness, vigor, romanticism and glamour of her art shrugs off the caginess of art based on systems, unabashedly embracing the subjects of the past without apology and self-consciousness. Oh, it's gone.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. He wrote by way of a conclusion in his review of the book. For artists seeking an antidote to the irony and insincerity of postmodernism, art such as Iankoshvili's is a route to an alternative future.
And just a question that arises immediately, alternative future, how do you, and we can talk more about this later on in the presentation, but what did you mean by it? What did you imply by this?
What I was principally meant was that some of the conditions of postmodernism are necessarily to do with irony, distance, the atomization of language, and a certain ironical distance and failure to take things in an absolutely serious manner. And I think the problem once you start deconstructing language is that you become paralyzed. And what I like about Iankoshvili is that she genuinely engaged with her subjects, that she had a deep feeling for them, and she wanted to express something that she saw in these subjects, in landscapes, in figures, in portraits, and so forth. And I think it's that genuine engagement and a genuine wish to touch and move the viewer that makes her different from the painters of postmodernism.
Yes, and also from social realism, right? That was of her time, and that's why she was such a nonconformist in her approach. And later,
I think something that I noticed is that I think that she's engaged in not only in expressionism but realism, in the sense that she is trying to describe her own real feelings, and she's also trying to convey something of the realism of the existence of an animal, of a landscape, of a portrait subject, in opposition to socialist realism, where the realism is purely nominal. It's decided by the party. The party decides that art must be politically useful, and they decide what is real and what is not real. But Iankoshvili, she says, no, there are certain things that I feel and there are certain things that I see which are real, and I'm going to describe them, and they're not going to be politically useful. They're going to be absent of political use. And so that's why I think that she's also a realist as well as an expressionist, but this is in opposition to socialist realism.
Right. So a couple more images from her. One is excellent series, the illustrations to Shota Rustaveli's Night in Panther Skin, and another is Portrait of Her Mother, that also showcase her very striking and very kind of nonconformist approach to illustration or to portraits. And so I think it's a good place also to start with the way, what was the first time that you hear about Natela Iankoshvili, and how did you come to have a dual exhibition with her right now in Berlin?
Well, I'm a book reviewer. I write for a number of different publications. And so I keep looking at publishers' websites, and I was scrolling through the Herma Verlag publishing website, and I saw this book on an artist I'd never heard of, Natela Iankoshvili, and I thought, well, this is an interesting name. I know it's Georgian, because I know the Vili ending is very common for Georgian names. And I thought, well, I've never reviewed a book on a Georgian artist before. This is a new book. This looks like an interesting artist. Also, I have an interest in the Soviet era of Russian art, of the Russian region. So it would be interesting to see an artist who's working at this time who is not a socialist realist. So I reviewed the book, and that was a fascinating, because I didn't really know very much about the sort of the non-conformist art of the Soviet Union. And I spoke to Mamuka Bliadze, who is the author of the book and who is connected to Gallery Kornfeld. And he looked at my work and said, well, actually, there are some parallels. There are many differences, but there are some parallels between your work and Iankoshvili's. So would you be interested in an exhibition in 2020? And I said, yes, that would be fantastic.
Yes, and juxtaposition between your work and hers. So you both work with landscapes, but you use such a restricted palette, right? And for you, I think it's important to kind of create this this in-between shades, right? Between this kind of the contrasts, and you work within this. You work with this idea of the landscape and the mountains that are abstract, but in a different way from Iankoshvili. But at the same time, I can see the parallels. So I can definitely see where Mamuka Bliadze's vision came into place with this. And so this, so the show is on view through the end of this month, right? Through the end of July, and then.
Yes, it opened in June 2021, and it finishes on the 31st of July 2021.
Right, and you didn't have a chance to see it in person, unfortunately.
No, sadly, because of the lockdown restrictions, the travel restrictions, I was unable to travel, which is a shame, because I lived in Berlin for many years, for 7 years. So I have many reasons to return to Berlin. So it would be wonderful to see the exhibition, to visit places I know, and to see my friends. But that wasn't possible, unfortunately. I hope I will have a chance to visit and see Iankoshvili's art and also my art exhibited maybe separately at different times.
Yes, but have you seen Natela's work in person?
No, as you'll know, there is no work by her in a British public collection. Yeah. I imagine that there are paintings in London, probably in the collection of Georgian collectors. Right. But as far as I know, there is nothing in a public collection in Britain, sadly.
And sadly, I can tell you that even here, I just visited the National Gallery last week and I inquired about Iankoshvili's works on view, but there were none. There are some at the New Georgian Museum of Fine Art. There are about 10 works on view, but I don't think that they do justice to, I mean, there are some landscapes and some portraits, but I don't think they represent her whole kind of range of what she did as an artist. But I hope that at some point you will be able to see it in person, because I was fortunate to see it and to co-curate this exhibition here with Mamuka in 2018 at the Tbilisi MoMA, Museum of Modern Art. And it's so much energy, it's so much vividness in those brush strokes. And you cannot even believe that it was done so many years ago, comparatively speaking. So I would like just to talk a little bit about Natela Iankoshvili's family. So her parents were Archil Iankoshvili and Mariam Zardiashvili. They were both teachers from Gurjani, just in province of Kakheti, but they moved to Tbilisi and they raised their children here. And from early on, they instilled love of nature and literature in their daughters. And we have here the image of Natela with her sisters. And throughout her life, she was very close to her sisters. Then she went to art school. Although she started drawing and she was fascinated with art from early on. In 1937, she enrolled in the Academy of Arts in Tbilisi. And here she had many very talented teachers, but I think that the three main ones that she pointed out later on, her writings and her letters were David Kakabadze, sculptor and painter and set designer Tamara Bakelia, and well-known painter Sergo Kobuladze. And I included some of their works just to have an idea who her teachers were, because I think it's always interesting. I don't know how it is for you, Alexander, but for me it's very important to see who are the teachers of an artist, and then just to kind of see if there are any influences, what they kind of were inspired as students, because, you know, for an artist, probably also when you have a very strong teacher, probably it's a little hard to move outside of that influence. What do you think? Do you see any similarity from like David Kakabadze or Tamara Bakelia here in comparison to Natela's work, for example? So we have David Kakabadze. Yes, please go ahead.
Well, I think maybe obviously there is an engagement with Georgian subjects, sure. But I'm very interested that she's not interested in so much in history and heroism, that right. Heroism for her is more to do with existing in yourself and being true to yourself. And also maybe we could also extend that to her own art, that right. Being an artist who stands up alone against the system, or at least outside the system, is an act of heroism.
She did that very openly, and yes, and it's great that she was not repressed for it, as so many others have suffered so much. And it's, yeah, so please go back to your point.
Yeah, so I think that her interest in, there's an interest in strong figures, in dramatic scenes, in single figures. Yes, not so much, but obviously not so much in tableau or scenes of a historical character. That doesn't seem to be, I think maybe this comes in the illustrations. I don't know the illustrations so well. I know the paintings better, but I can't see a parallel between these particular pieces and her work.
Right. I think in terms
apart from maybe the drama and the excitement.
The drama and the excitement and the heightened reality, right? This kind of the vigor that we see in Sergo Kobuladze's work. And actually Sergo Kobuladze created like iconic illustrations to Shota Rustaveli's poems. And I'm sure, I mean, everybody in Georgia grows up looking at his illustrations. It's very much part of our DNA in this, starting from the elementary school. But I think I'm really admiring her illustrations to the poem, because she added some lyricism, but at the same time, it's not sweet at all. It's lyrical, but in a very kind of elegant and sincere way. And we see that in this very romantic black and white and green, not black and white, black and green tableaus that she created for the poem. But let's get there. It's yeah. So I also wanted to say a little bit about her, talk a little bit about her husband, poet Natela Iankoshvili, who played a very important role in her life. So the couple met during their studies at the Academy of Arts in Tbilisi, and during his lifetime, Iankoshvili wrote several important books, including biography of poet Grigol Robakidze, trilogy of novels, The New Horizon, as well as numerous stories and plays. Iankoshvili and Iankoshvili were a very strong couple, and there are many testaments in Mamuka's book also about the way that the husband really supported Natela and how he created a very kind of serene and special environment for her to create her paintings. And they never had children. And as Iankoshvili wrote, art is only true when you sacrifice yourself for it. Lado and I have sacrificed ourselves for it. We have no children. And somewhere else, I remember reading that she said that her paintings are her children. Openly she was, and I think it's Georgia being a very traditional country, and bearing children is very kind of central to a woman's role in the society. It was very strong of her, and also very non-conformist, to kind of say it very openly that she doesn't want to do it because she has her bigger mission, and she saw her painting as her mission. I think maybe it's worth mentioning the fact that her husband is I think he's a poet, and I think he also wrote sort of criticism and history as well. Right. Yes.
Yeah, and I think it's very interesting that you have this combination of two very creative people, but they're working in different areas. And I think that that's really important, because I think if he was a painter, there might have been an element of competition, but whereas they worked in different fields, there was no direct competition. So they could be supportive, they could be partners, they could be allies, without any people coming in outside and judging them, comparing them, because they're working in two different fields. I think that's that must have been a great support for both of them.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. Yes, they were partners in a very genuine kind of meaning of the word. So in terms of artistic approach, yes, I think it would have been so interesting for us now to see her early works that she burned, about 200 of them. And she chose to ignore the demands of the Soviet realism in art. And in a way, this, I think that this destruction also kind of helped her to find the freedom to create a new, unexpected and daring direction that we now associate with her. Because I think I saw, there is one painting of her that is much more traditional. I wasn't able, unfortunately, to take the photo of it, but I don't believe it's that one of those early works, but it's different. And what we see now is kind of, it's so different in a very kind of in a sensual and expressive way. So
and I think she kept an early portrait of her husband for sentimental reasons.
Yes, it's one of those. Yes. So, okay, so right now here we have Autumn at Kiziki, which is arguably one of her masterpieces that's still surviving. So would you like to talk a little bit the way you see it, the way how you respond to it as an artist and as a critic?
Yeah, I would say that this is something between Van Gogh and Expressionism, because you see these pollarded trees, and they are acting like almost dancers, almost figures, who are supplicating under this amazing dramatic sky. And so you've got a degree of projection of the pathetic fallacy, where objects become imbued with human characteristics. And so you can almost see these trees as dancers or as worshippers, enjoying enjoying or expressing their gratitude to nature.
There is something paganistic almost in these trees, right? They're like pagan altars.
Yes, because she was very involved with Georgian history and with Georgian people and the landscape. But I don't think that she painted any overtly religious works, did she?
I mean, I haven't seen so far. I don't believe so. I mean, she painted outstanding examples of Georgian architecture that she did in David Gareji, for example, and many different. And I know that she went on special trips to actually paint it, to paint this architectural ensembles and churches to remote parts of Georgia, but not specifically religious scenes. I haven't seen it.
So it's indirectly.
It's indirectly, and there is so much spirituality in all of this, as you mentioned. So we can argue that that was the way. So another work, also Green Cape. So what association does this one create for you? I mean, feel free to comment in any way you think is appropriate.
For me, I think that this is a reaction to her visiting jungles on her foreign trips from the 1960s and 1970s. And I think that she's responding to the drama of the place, and she's also trying to capture a sense of the place, which was so different from the Rocky Mountains of her home, and that this is to do with capturing the truth of the place and expressing herself. So in that sense, of course, it's classic expressionism, but it's also trying to document, trying to find a middle ground between documenting something literally and documenting her own emotional reaction. So it's a fusion of the two.
Right. And also the contrast of the color here, also the blue that usually we see it as the brush stroke. We never see it as a kind of, the way it was usually used to for the sky, right? But here, I think she was so fascinated with this interplay of these colors that she just included it there as a background.
Yes, because so often her skies are black with slashes of clouds,
Yes,
but here it's actually honestly blue, which is
yes,
quite dramatic for her.
yes, it is very dramatic also because I think the rest of her landscape is so, as you mentioned, there is this influence by Nico Pirosmani that we can also we'll talk about it later. I also wanted to include this two quotes from critics, and so one is from Marlene Stossel, and both of this quotation also come from Mamu Kabliata's book. I just want to point this out. So it is well known that the night devours and erases colors, but in Natela Iankoshvili's pictures, they bloom like life that ecstatically unfolds in them. Where does this light that falls in this night covering the mountains and flows with shimmering gray, the primary color of purple, come from? And I think it's a very very on point observation here. So because so much of life is killed, right, during the nighttime, but for her, it seems that everything blooms, specifically when the moon is shining. So it's very different from what we expect of that time specifically. And then important Georgian French critic Gaston Boachidze wrote, one does find subdued colors and smiling softness, tenderness in her works, but it's above all in this profound dark depths where the essence of her paintings is rooted. I also feel like this dark depths is a very strong word combination that's so on point for Natela's analysis. So here I wanted to include a couple of paintings from Nico Pirosmani and Natela Iankoshvili. And Nico Pirosmani, of course, was, for Georgia, it's one of those iconic names. So he lived in 1862, 1918. He was what we could now call outsider artist. He was not really recognized by establishment. He was very poor. He had very limited materials, but he created this very he captured Tbilisi and Georgia at a very unique time, just before the Soviet invasion of Georgia in 1921. And we can see this life that it's gone from the city forever, but it still blooms in his works. And Natela, for me, for Georgian, it's a little bit difficult. Not difficult, it's a little easy to connect the two, but do you see this inspiration from Nico Pirosmani in Natela's work?
Yes, very much, because you have a strong sense of flatness, you have the drama of very direct brushstrokes, so you don't have so much, certainly you look at the sky and you look at the clouds, these are very directly painted. You have the drama of the black background, you have the excitement of the nocturne, and the sort of the fusion of day and night, which is common to both artists. You have the strong green color. Yes, I see very strong connections between the artists.
And I just wanted to put it side by side like this. So this is Arsenale Hill at night, iconic painting from Nico Pirosmani, one of my favorite paintings from him, and Natela Iankoshvili's Katsis column. And the parallels here are very striking, right?
Yeah, and also you have like alla prima painting. So this is clearly something that both of these are ones that are clearly painted with a lot of thought, but they're painted quite quickly, and they may have been executed in one session each. So, and they're also eschewing all of the tricks of traditional painting. So you don't have much atmospheric recession. You don't have much sort of careful graduation. You don't have the hiding of brushwork. You don't have complex modeling of forms in terms of sort of volume and shade. So absolutely, that they both reject the polite standard of salon art, and they take it into a more sort of direct area.
Right, and also both of them take place at night, and both of them have this luminescence, right? We have this luminescence in Natela's work as well as in Pirosmani's. In Natela's work, we don't see the moon there, but we can sense it, and in Pirosmani's work also. So it's I think these two paintings really talk to each other. I wish we could see them really in real life. And I think also what you mentioned there in terms of their approach, both of the artists, Pirosmani as well as Iankoshvili, they were very fast as artists, right? As I know, Natela used to work on one painting until it was finished. She was not the artist who works at several different works at the same time, simultaneously. And I think similar, this was the case with Nico as well, because I don't think he had the luxury of actually, he just had the canvas and he had to paint something right then and there. And Natela had similar kind of approach. So they're very fast, very direct. And as you were saying, very kind of to the point of what they were doing at the moment, not trying to overthink it or overdo it, although a lot of more, I mean, there was a lot of thought behind it, but it was not overworked. So I think, let's see. Now we have a couple of portraits from Natela. So what do you think about her portraits?
It's interesting because this is in some way she has to restrain herself a lot more. Because she's either depicting an actual person or she's depicting a particular type that she's trying to synthesize, to simplify. Whereas with the landscapes, you know that they're a lot freer, a lot more spontaneous. I think it's interesting that she's not a slave to her temperament. She's able to set aside her stronger, more impetuous, stronger, direct side in order to make something which has more finesse and delicacy. And I think that's quite interesting that she has this range and that she's applying it very appropriately to the subject.
Right, and also I think it's interesting to see how many different types of women she painted throughout her life. All these actresses and all of this, you know, it's just such a chronology of the people. Looking at her portraits, you can see cultural life of Tbilisi unfolding in front of her eyes, because she painted all this educated women alongside with the women that she just found striking. And I know that she used to bring some people to her studio because she was interested in them visually. So it's interesting how these portraits unfold and how they show the
do you know if the portraits of Georgian women, do you know if they were commissioned or whether they were directed by the artist, that she was just excited to paint this person and there was no agreement that the picture would be anything?
I think, not that I think, I've read in Mamuka's book and elsewhere also that she never actually sold her painting. If she liked someone whom she painted, she just gave it as a present. She was against selling her work. So I don't think there was any direct commission. Maybe it was, I think maybe by mutual agreement, but it was never kind of for an exchange for any kind of payments. She was very kind of untraditional in that way as well, like thinking that it's not appropriate for an artist to, you know, to exchange it for anything material. And this is also admiring. And also I included in this presentation, so this is very traditional kind of art, and this is very interesting painting on its own, Collecting Tea by Apollon Kutateladze, who was very well established in Georgian cultural life and Georgian artist circles. But we see here traditional landscape from the Soviet time, with its kind of, you know, glorifying the work of hardworking people of Guria as they're collecting tea there. And then we see Natela's paintings in there somewhere else in a very different kind. And also a couple of portraits. Ketevan Magalashvili was actually very, very well established as well. She had painted also a very wide range of people of her time, but as we see here, it's a very different from what we see in Natela's portraits. What do you think about these two artists based on this? Just curious.
Yeah, I think it's, and these are both female artists.
No, one Apollon Kutateladze was actually male, and then Ketevan Magalashvili was. I wanted to include portraits from a different female artist who was more traditional.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that when Iankoshvili paints, that she's that a lot of her work seems to be a rejection of decorum. Just the decorum of the artist, the decorum of detachment. And I think that this is a good example of artists who are more closely following decorum. And I think that Iankoshvili's work is interesting in that she rejects the decorum of adhering to the official style. Right. That she works outside, she works completely outside of it. So the subjects are not socialist realist, the style is not socialist realist. She's painting foreign subjects. She's not, I think she's not engaging in commissions, she's not going in for competitions and so forth. So it's very interesting that she seems to be rejecting decorum, and also the decorum of finished surfaces and delicate technique and so forth, and restrained colors. That she's saying, no, I'm not interested in decorum at all. And I think it's very interesting to compare her to other painters of her era and her milieu, who are much more involved in decorum.
But if you can compare this portrait by Ketan Magalashvili with Black Girl by Natela, we can see how drastically different it is for our eyes now. And Black Girl, if I saw this painting in New York, for example, in a gallery, it looks so contemporary, right? There is nothing that shows that it was painted in 1965.
Absolutely. So when I talk about Iankoshvili being an alternative to postmodernism, I think that there are many things that contemporary painters could latch onto: the directness, the excitement of the paint, the lack of irony and lack of detachment. I think that these are all things that a lot of young artists are hungry for, having been exposed to a lot of postmodernism, that this is something that feels very exciting for them.
Right. And it seems I can always sense her personal kind of attitude towards her subject, that she was fascinated by their face or their shape or their color combination. There's so much of her personal passion in this, this expressionism there that didn't fade at all. And Iankoshvili's trip to Cuba actually was influential to her, and we can see this amazing painting from that period. So she was able to travel, and as we know, Cuba was part of the Soviet system, so she was able to travel there. She also traveled to Mexico and to several countries in Europe, but Cuba stayed with her. And in her letters, she mentioned quite a few times that she was fascinated by the color and the people and the culture that she saw there. And we can see here this also striking portrait, the Black Madonna. So would you like to talk a little bit about this one?
Yeah, I think that her responses to the Cuban people, because I've looked at these paintings before, and I think that this is very much a response of an artist to, as she saw it, a pre-modern world. Mm-hmm. So she's very interested in looking at these as in terms of sort of the 19th century romantic, or even the sort of prehistory and so forth. That she's interested in experiencing or recording some of her responses to something that seems like a pre-modern world, a pre-political world, something that's primeval.
Pure, yes, something that's pure, that's not touched by the system. I'm sure that on some level she was really, maybe she even wanted to live in a place like that, but she was never, of course, she could never express it in the Soviet time. And maybe in a way, this was her expression of this longing for this, simpler time, simpler society that was not ruled by the terror or the fear or propaganda or whatever else was going on in Tbilisi of her time. So, yeah, but this take on this traditional archetypal image of Madonna and the Child in Cuba by Georgian painter. It's something that
also I think there's just a certain frankness, a certain honesty about being excited to see people with a different color skin.
Right.
And not being embarrassed to say, this is really interesting, I want to try and depict this, I want to use these new colors, I want to depict these new facial features. And this is something that I love, this sort of this directness, this frankness, which is very refreshing compared to today, and also compared to the Soviet system, where people were very much sort of looking over their shoulder, wondering about how what they were doing was going to be interpreted.
Yes, very hesitant, and of course afraid to express their kind of honest motives and their thoughts, because it would have, have been really dangerous physically for them. And then this enigma, that's such an enigmatic painting, really. It's such a perfect title for this painting as well, that we can see this monkeys contemplating the fate of our fate, maybe, who knows. And also at the same time, this very loose, abstract in a way, probably she was inspired by a specific place, but at the same time we see this, it's so full of symbolism, right? At the same time, there is the flower that this monkey is holding. So what's your interpretation of the specific work?
Well, in a way, I think that what she's doing is she's detaching herself from the socio-political system and the view of, obviously the Cold War and stuff, because this is 1983. So I think that she's sort of detaching herself and saying, that there are certain truths which are beyond geopolitical concerns.
Yeah.
There is nature, there is the response of animals, there is the cycle of nature, and so forth, and that these are eternal things. I think maybe even you could go so far as to say, well, maybe this is a touch satirical, that this is a touch satirical of the great political powers and the great leaders gazing upon the world and deciding, where the boundaries must go and where the armies go and where the pipelines go. And maybe in a way that this is, she is perhaps mocking. I don't know, maybe that's a different, maybe that's not her way.
Well, we would never know for sure, but also in a way, maybe it's her commentary on this kind of, Darwinism, who knows, in a way, because, thinking about Georgian Christianity, and until very recently, Darwinism was really laughed at here. The theory of evolution was not something that was kind of looked upon kindly until recently. So, and in her time, I'm sure it was even more so. So maybe in a way, it's her commentary on this kind of transformation that we went through as species, and looking at this as an artist, at the same time creating an enigmatic work out of this. And the flower, what do you make of this flower that the monkey is holding here on the left?
Yeah, it really is. I mean, this is a fascinating picture, because very often the subject matter is very clear in a Iankoshvili painting. But this is one where this is a puzzle painting. This is sort of like a 19th century symbolist painting. But here, it's really difficult to interpret, and I like that ambiguity.
Yes, I think that she specifically made it for in this kind of striking and detached way, right? Because compared to other paintings that we saw. Have you ever seen any other of her paintings with animals? I'm trying to remember, but I don't believe that I did, in terms of
I think there was some of monkeys, maybe some of birds, maybe parrots.
Birds, yes, the birds.
Yes,
I have seen, and they are also.
Yeah, so there was a painting of parrots done in 1980.
Right.
So yeah, so this is one of her trips to Central America or Cuba. Yeah.
Yes,
and of course that was a natural subject for her, for these these dramatic splashes of color surrounded by all the sort of the green foliage. Yeah.
And I'm sure for her as an artist, it was very important to see this very different environment, as you pointed out, with very kind of strong colors. And I think that we can see those colors coming back in a way when she paints Georgia in those years. When she paints Georgia again, and her landscape transformed and became even more daring in terms of the approach. Also, so I included here illustrations for Shota Rustaveli's Night in Panther Skin that we talked about briefly. And so they were created in 1965, 1966 and released in 1966 on Rustaveli's 800th birthday. And have you ever heard of the poem?
No, sadly not. I mean, the first time I heard it mentioned was in the book.
Yeah, so it's essentially a medieval epic poem that was written in 12th century by Shota Rustaveli and as a secret homage to King Tamar, Queen of Georgia, and it's rumored that he was secretly in love with her. But the whole poem, it's an epic poem, so it has many different layers. Of course, it's very philosophical. It's written in wonderful language that you might compare to Shakespeare, what Shakespeare did for the British literature, Rustaveli did for Georgian literature, kind of creating a very literal Georgian that was different from what was used by, on the street. And so, and Iankoshvili also takes it in a very different and striking direction as she does with everything. I love this specific portrait of, is it a woman? It is a woman, but she's so mysterious that she's half real and half ghost almost, right? With her black and green there, and this very fine lines. And we have one of the heroes of the poem here, and the whole poem is essentially it's a love story between two different couples, and they help each other, and it takes them to all the different corners of the world. Of that world, 12th century, it was compared to the global reality of today, it was limited to a few countries, but it was still kind of epic journey. So what's not, since you don't have like solid understanding of the poem or the storyline, which is not at all important in this case, what do you make of these drawings as an art critic?
I'm very interested. Were these planned to be published, or were they just planned to be exhibited?
No, they were released. They were released as part, I think, as a part of a special edition in 1966 on Rustaveli's 800th birthday. So they were released as an album, and probably there was an exhibition associated with it. I will take a look at the specific information, but I don't think there is an album that's available for viewing right now, but I'm sure it was public.
I think it's, yeah, so what she's doing is she's taking the essence of the characters and depicting the essence rather than actually drawing sort of narrative events. So she's not describing a scene and two people interacting, or right, an animal and a person interacting. She's taking the essence and she's kind of refining that essence and just presenting that. Right.
So yeah, she takes the main kind of the main heroes and just puts them front and center without any detail. And this is so also so different from this traditional illustration that's usually go along with
it. And also socialist realism, of course, was very much to do with telling a story. So it was quite explicable. It was like a 19th century salon painting, in that you had certain set characters doing certain roles, and you could read, oh, that this person is paying the rent to this person, or this person is assisting in the harvest and so forth, and this is the commissar who's overlooking them and so forth. But obviously Iankoshvili is turning her back on that, and she's saying, that I'm more interested in the essence of these people rather than the narrative. Or it's not my job to just to repeat the narrative. Right. It's my job to encapsulate the essence of the characters.
Yeah, I think your point about her disregarding the main kind of the narrative as the way that she needed to go with, she just discredited it. I mean, she just discarded it, and she just went along with the essence of this the main characters rather than trying to really illustrate it. And it's amazing that she did it this way. So we have this really freestanding works of art rather than page by page illustration.
Very original, very personal.
Very personal, yes. So, and then in her lifetime, so in 1960, she had personal exhibition with 250 paintings and graphic works at the State Picture Gallery of Georgia in Tbilisi, and we have the photo from this exhibition. And now this is the place that's called Georgian National Gallery. And this was the first personal exhibition of a female artist at this museum. And then 1976, she becomes a People's Artist of Georgia, personal exhibition at the House of Literature in Moscow, 1987, which was very important at that time. Having an exhibition in Moscow was very kind of honorable. And then 1995, Shota Rustaveli Prize laureate. In 1996, she receives the Georgian Medal of Honor. And then in 2000, foundation of the Natela Iankoshvili Museum in Tbilisi. The artist dedicates her art to the Georgian people and wills the artist's estate to the Natela Iankoshvili Museum, and so to the people of Georgia. And I hope that at some point you will be able to come and visit this very special museum. And in 2002, the artist is made an honorary citizen of Tbilisi. And then, so now we're at the stage of rediscovery of this very important artist who was so striking. And I think that Kornfeld Gallery does really amazing work with this. And one of them was, one of the work was 2019 book by Memuka Bliadze that we referred to throughout this presentation, Natela Iankoshvili, an artist's struggle between coercion and freedom. In 2018, solo show at the Museum of Modern Art in Tbilisi, Georgia, solo show at Frieze, New York Spotlight section, and we see the photo from Frieze. And then the exhibition I curated at Kunstverein Villa Wessel, Iserlohn, Germany, 2017, solo show at Art Brussels, Rediscovery section, Gallery Kornfeld, and 2012, her solo exhibition also at Gallery Kornfeld. And I think the gallery does really important work with, presenting contemporary Georgian art to the West, and also working with Natela Iankoshvili's estate, because she really deserves to be seen in the West. And I hope that they will continue and will create other projects, maybe in UK or in the US, or as well as in Georgia. Because as you know, there are this kind of large exhibitions of this important artists. They need to be repeated every 10 years. Otherwise, every generation needs to see it on their own term and then understand and value these incredible women. So would you like to say anything, like in conclusion to our conversation, Alexander?
Yes, I would like to say that I do think that Iankoshvili is a particularly interesting artist if you're interested in the situation of the individual dissident in a political system which is opposed to individuality and to private languages of expression. So I think that she's well worth looking at in those terms. Also in terms of an artist who rejects decorum and decides to pursue a path which is full of more personal motivation. I think that that's that's a natural way to, it's a natural antidote to postmodern irony. So I would say that she's well worth looking at for those reasons, and also for the excitement and quality of her work.
Wonderful. Thank you, Alexander, for your time. Appreciate you participating in the project.
My pleasure. Thank you, Nina.